Muharram 7. On the 7th of Muharram, by the command of Umar ibn Sa'ad, the cruel-hearted Shimr ibn Diljashan mercilessly ordered the blockade of the Euphrates River, cutting off water from Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, and his companions. The water supply was completely halted with the deliberate intent to inflict both physical and spiritual suffering on the family of the Prophet, al-Bayt. Whenever anyone tried to approach the river or bring water to the tents, Yazid's soldiers would fire arrows at them, turning even a simple attempt at drawing water into a deadly risk. This was not merely a military tactic, it was a psychological weapon designed to break the will, patience, and faith of the Prophet's household, the intensity of thirst in the state of the tents. Once the water was cut off, extreme thirst began to torment the camp of Imam Hussain, peace be upon him. The suffering of the children and women became unbearable. The cries and wails of the thirsty children would shake the hearts of even the hardest souls, and with every passing moment, the agony of thirst intensified. The companions of Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, endured the same suffering, yet not one of them abandoned patience or faith. This thirst was not only of the body, it was a cruel stratagem of the enemy to shatter the spiritual resilience of the al-Bayt. But the attempt failed. Their strength remained unbroken. The role of Hazrat Abbas, peace be upon him, and the patience of the Imam. In this agonizing time, Hazrat Abul Fazl al-Abbas, peace be upon him, along with a few loyal companions, made repeated efforts to bring water to the camp. On some occasions, a small amount of water did reach the tents, but these missions were incredibly dangerous. The bravery and sacrifice of these devoted men were unmatched. Amidst all of this, Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, continuously encouraged his companions to remain patient and comforted his family, reminding them that God's help was near. His unshakable patience and composure in such a severe trial reflected the pinnacle of moral and spiritual excellence, a guiding light for humanity for all time. The siege, counsel, and spiritual preparation. Meanwhile, the Yazidi army tightened its formation and intensified the siege around the tents. Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, once again advised his enemies to refrain from war, invoking the Quran and the sanctity of the Prophet's family, pleading with them to remember their ties to the Messenger of God, peace be upon him. But their hearts were sealed. On the other side, Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, and the members of al-Bayt turned to spiritual preparation. Worship, remembrance of God, recitation of the Quran, and prayer became their refuge. The 7th of Muharram marked a day when oppression intensified, but it also revealed the spiritual nobility and unmatched dignity of the al-Bayt to the world. Muharram 8 Karbala was not merely a battlefield, it is a timeless chronicle of patience, loyalty, and sacrifice, one that history will never forget. Karbala is not just the name of a place, it is a historical and spiritual symbol of the eternal struggle between truth and falsehood. It was on this land that Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, and his devoted companions offered a sacrifice so profound that it became a lasting example of patience, steadfastness, faithfulness, and the ultimate devotion to God. This event is not only sacred to Muslims, it has become a shining emblem for all of humanity in the fight against oppression and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. The 8th of Muharram marks a dark moment in the saga of Karbala. It was the day when tyranny escalated and the story of unwavering patience grew even more radiant. On the command of Umar ibn Sa'ad, the cruel-hearted Shimr took yet another step in cruelty. He blocked access to the waters of the Euphrates, a river that flowed freely for all, cutting it off from Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, and his parched camp. The Euphrates, once a silent witness to Hussein's justice and mercy, now stood still and voiceless, forced to watch the thirst that tyranny had inflicted. On the 8th of Muharram, the siege grew even more intense. The tents stood with no shade, and the scorching desert heat became unbearable. Anyone who dared to fetch water became a target for the arrows of Yazid's archers. Arrows flew from all sides. The night of Ashura drew near. Time seemed to stand still, but the engines of injustice moved faster than ever. The Yazidi forces tightened their grip around the camp. Swords, spears, arrows, and merciless soldiers surrounded them. Men who knew neither mercy, nor law, nor kinship. The tightening circle around the tents choked not only the bodies but the very breath of the camp. Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, his family and his loyal companions were now fully besieged. There was no way out and no hope of rescue. Within that siege remained only patience, silence, prayer, and tear-filled eyes. Food supplies had run dry. Water had been cut off for days. The children's thirst began to bleed through their eyes. The elderly grew weaker, and the young, despite their restlessness, prepared for battle with quiet dignity. This was the atmosphere, so heavy that even the earth trembled and the skies mourned. This silence, though outwardly calm, bore an unbearable weight. It was an announcement. The battle was near, a battle to be fought not merely with swords, but with character. A battle where there would be no defeat, only martyrdom. A battle that would not end, but would forever draw a line between truth and falsehood. Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, knew the time had come, yet there was no fear on his face, no anxiety, only a divine calm that could be seen in the hearts that place full trust in God. Those tiny lips, once reciting verses of the Quran, were now parched with thirst. Little ones like Ali Asghar, peace be upon him, who had barely experienced life's breeze, shivered on the burning sands, consumed by thirst. But even in this unbearable moment, there was no complaint from Hussein's camp, only patience, gratitude, and absolute trust in God's will. Even then, Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, made one final effort to avoid war and save the Ummah from bloodshed. Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him, raised in the arms of Zahra, peace be upon her, and under the shade of Ali, peace be upon him, the one to whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, entrusted his face, was now encircled by tyrants. Yet his heart held no anger, no vengeance, only pain and compassion. Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, once more called out to the people of Kufa in the army of Yazid. He raised the Quran before them, invoked the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, reminded them of their ties of blood and the sanctity of the Prophet's family. He said, "If you do not recognize my right, then at least remember that I am the grandson of your Prophet, peace be upon him, standing before you." But alas, their hearts were blind. Their consciences had died. The lust for power had veiled their eyes, and before the glitter of Yazid's court, the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him, had been turned into a stranger. Every counsel, every plea, every reminder from Imam Hussain, peace be upon him, meant only to prevent war and save the unity of the Muslim Ummah, was rejected. No one listened. No one relented. Truth cried out until it was hoarse, while falsehood stood tall in arrogance. This was the moment when it became clear. Words would no longer suffice. The blood of Hussain, peace be upon him, would now be shed so that the religion of Muhammad, peace be upon him, could be preserved. 8th of Muharram, the day when the soil of Karbala turned redder still and the shadows of oppression grew even darker. On this day, a few of Imam Hussein's, peace be upon him, devoted companions once again etched a new chapter of loyalty with their blood in search of water. Every step they took was a testimony to their unwavering allegiance, and every breath they drew was in service to the protection of Hussein's banner. They knew that even a single sip of water might be their last, yet they walked into the jaws of death, driven only by the hope of quenching the thirst of Hussein's children. Some of these brave souls were martyred by Yazid's archers as they moved toward the Euphrates under the cover of night. Their hands returned empty, but their cloaks were filled with the honor of martyrdom. Their sacrifices became the prelude to Ashura, the rising sun on the horizon of Karbala, a beginning marked by the first lights of truth in the epic battle between righteousness and falsehood. On this very day, Imam Hussein's messenger, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Yaqtar, was brutally martyred in Kufa. He was the same Abdullah whom Hussain, peace be upon him, had sent with the message of truth to speak against Yazid's tyranny and injustice. But Kufa, once a center of the love for Ali, peace be upon him, had now bowed to the fear and greed of Yazid's rule. The martyrdom of Abdullah ibn Yaqtar was not just the death of a man, It was a chilling sign that now the voice of truth would no longer be heard through words. It would speak through blood. All these sacrifices, the martyrdom of those who search for water, the blood of the messenger of truth, and the tightening siege around Hussein's camp, were all leading to one point, Ashura, a moment when time would freeze and history would be changed forever. Karbala is not just a story of the past. It is the mirror of every era's battle between truth and falsehood. The question remains, are we truly Hussaini?